Hey, it's time.
What time?
Hey, you should make a video, you know? Like, it's been, how long was it since you made a video?
Well, I mean, if making video is a necessity, Oh, wait. It is. Okay, sure. I guess this is probably the time I actually took a longer break, I guess. Why didn't I actually make a video, huh? Well, I've been enjoying a lot of games. Expedition 33, it was pretty good. It reminded me of the older JRPGs that I actually loved back golden days, I guess. There's actually some, private server grinding I actually did because of nostalgia reasons. There are some other games that I actually enjoy, like Helldivers 2. And I also had to transition from my previous work to the new work environment, and I had to get used to that. And of course, a lot of other things like some gacha games and man, come to think of it, why didn't I make a video? Well, I guess whatever, since I guess I just consider it as a long break. I guess it's time for me to return again, back into content creation, since everything is starting to become more stable. But New Genesis is, well, that's how flexible it is, that's the reason why I still play New Genesis from time to time, because yeah, you see how casual I am playing the game. I don't really have any FOMO. I don't really think that, if I miss any logins in the game currently, I will be missing out on a lot of stuff. I know there is like this daily login rewards that you can get from the new Tensura collab with the slime anime, whatever. The thing is that, well, I mean, it's just cutouts, board cutouts for your creative spaces, so it's not really that, FOMO anyways. I think it's okay if you actually miss out of all of those, because there are creative spaces that will have all of them displayed properly anyways. If you miss them, well, at least other players have it. So it's not really anything that you can miss out, because other players are going to just display them anyways, and it's the same thing. It's not going to grant you any power, it's not going to grant you any advantage, unlike a lot of other games out there. And it's just a chill game, right?
Then why don't you make a new video about it?
You know what? Let's try that then. That's actually a good idea. Hey, let's try that. Let's try that. Especially after the whole debacle or ranting that some of us content creators did, and that people assuming that I am wishing the worst for PSO2NGS. Nuh-uh. I'm going to not be a hypocrite and just say like, hey, I still enjoy the game blatantly, without explaining the reason why. So this video is probably about that, and maybe much more. It's relatable to you as well as a gamer, if you actually enjoy playing other free-to-play live service online games as well. So, do you remember the good old days of getting legendary gear, or just weapons back in MMOs or just any RPGs, when there were rare loot or just something that changes the way you play games? Well, unfortunately nowadays, these were just fleeting memories, as games become much more safer and optimized experiences. Well, gearing up in the current game industry is really basic. It's very well expected that it's either a stat stick or it's just a stepping stone until you get to the end game and finally get the real good stuff. I miss the times when you can actually just buy anything from the store and you actually look pretty good. And instead of just being just another stat stick or just another stepping stone of a gear, well, it actually looks pretty good. I really experienced all this experience back in times when I actually played my childhood favorite MMORPG back then, which is called MapleStory, and maybe also something like that in like the RuneScape before it became something else entirely. I also remember there's a lot of like WoW fashion show as well, because you can actually transmog most of your armor pieces so that it can look pretty cool if you mix and match your pieces and stuff like that, which I think is the essence of player individuality that we have lost since this modern gaming era. And I just wish that we can actually obtain them back somehow, somewhere, without actually being forced a lot of these fashion pieces to be locked behind paywalls all the time. Cosmetic monetization in games had gotten very predatory, unfortunately. The longer we see more live services coming out and being churned out like crazy this past decade, some people might argue that, well, it's just cosmetics. What's the big deal, right? Well, I mean, sure, there are no gameplay related advantages for skins or looking glamorous. But don't you think there's something being left out here? The fact that, these items are usually locked behind a paywall, big or small, is always a deterrent for people who just likes to enjoy and customizing their own characters in games in general. You can see this egregious practice, well, particularly in gacha games, where skins on existing character can go up to the price of a AAA game, or maybe even slightly less if AAA games are now 70 or 80 bucks. Bro, why? Okay, aside from that, that means that you are literally expected to spend money trying to get the character first, or be lucky with your free pulls and somehow manage to get that character first before you are able to pay up money to change their appearance. Well, I mean, sure, it's pretty cool and all, and it's probably a very, very excessive spending if you really wanted to do that, but try to think logically, right? Why would this character switching a piece of clothing would cost like upwards of $60? Do you ever think about that before? Well, and not to mention that, well, before you actually able to obtain the said costume that everybody wanted, well, you are probably going to be even gated even more, some mechanic that actually will forces you to actually spend even more money to gamble for the skin. And it just feels very, very bad when literally the only reason why people will actually engage with such mechanics is to get that said skin. Like, do you know there is actually a reason on why Overwatch 2 is removing loot boxes when it actually first launched? Well, I mean, technically speaking, right, Overwatch 1 was popular and extremely successful because of their loot boxes. Sure, a lot of people might argue, hey, loot boxes are just gachas, right? Like, they give you a random chance of you to have a possibility to obtain the rare ones, which is the golden ones, and, well, you can actually, earn those by just playing the game. And it's actually pretty cool, because unlike a lot of like other games where you cannot really like obtain the cash shop or the premium items, well, at least in Overwatch you can actually just gamble until you get the good stuff. Hey, that's actually a very, very good way to keep the players in, because at least the players have reasoning to why they wanted to keep playing Overwatch and playing the same game mode over and over again because of the loot boxes, right? So imagine the disaster that was Overwatch 2 when they decided to just remove it outright. It has been a huge backlash that Overwatch 2 has to unfortunately bring back the loot box system, because they knew other gamesters are literally doing the opposite and they are being very, very successful. So that's why they bring it back, So, what does this all mean? Well, it just means that, some players, a lot of them, casual players, probably value cosmetics above a lot of things in the game. Unfortunately, not everybody is like us, not everybody has that mindset. And so what happens then? Well, kids, children, teenagers happen. Well, guess what they actually enjoy playing? Fortnite, Roblox. Guess what those two games are very popular about? Well, skins, emotes, costumes. Sometimes, whenever I just enjoy a game, I just feel something is missing. Something from my soul, something from my head, something related to creativity that I have lost by just, not able to get different appearances for my character. You might argue a lot of like character creation games actually allow extensive character creation tweaks and stuff like that, especially like high fidelity ones in comparison to even something like PSO2 New Genesis. The problem with those games is that, well, I mean, sure, you can make your character as hideous as possible, or as beautiful, or as handsome as possible. The fact that they are going to just wear the same costume as other players really just spoils your mood. Like, really? Are you going to make the best looking character but you're going to have the same drip as a normal player? Like, we are human beings. We love individual stuff, or we like to stand out because we are just unique than each other. So since we are completely unique, even if you have a twin sibling, I believe a lot of people might argue that, hey, some twin siblings are completely different or literally opposite ends of each other despite having the same face. So because we are such an individualistic kind of species, of course it's well known that, any customization that can make us stand out, especially in games, is going to be an amazing thing for us all. And unfortunately, corporations are now monetizing this part of our instinct to the maximum, without even giving us any choices unless we pay money for them. And yes, you might argue that, hey, it's fair because the gameplay contents is still intact. They can still technically just ignore the whole fashion stuff, and just play the game until the end and it'll be fine, right? Like a lot of other games does. But there are different kinds of people who might look at this and say, nah, I'm not gonna play the game because I cannot look fabulous in the game. So, is there a solution for all our fashion connoisseurs? Well, allow them to be resold then.
Did I stutter? Good, this is good.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. Like, why allow the resale of things that has real life value, right? But let's be real here. What is the theoretical value of a digital item anyways? Like, unless this item can be resold in the real world for, some money, or can be translated into a certain value that you can actually obtain from just selling this item back again, well, technically, any digital item that was locked in a paywall and cannot be traded at all is technically just useless, pointless, totally nothing. Like, the value for that item is like really, really low, considering the fact that, they can just simply make a different asset and just put it on the premium store and just say, okay, this costs theoretically a full-on AAA game. Who decides that? No, nobody wants something like that, right? Like, considering the fact that free-to-play games are very well accessible to everybody is because it's free. That's the reason why people actually, play the game. And you somehow expecting that free-to-play players are rich? Well, oh dear, I don't think so. Because you see, if all of the free-to-play players were to somehow leave a game, well, guess what happens? The whales or the few people who actually pay a lot of money will just realize that all these glamour, all these fashion items that they got, or all these interesting, premium items that they got is just very pointless because there's nobody else for you to actually flex on. Like, what's the point then? And when they actually realize this, they usually would just desert that free-to-play game and just move on to a much more popular game instead, to flex on that game instead. Like, it's the reality of a lot of free-to-play live service games that, if you keep on doing the same thing like this and just, don't care about the free-to-play players, it's just going to be a bad situation for the most part. Because if there is not much players playing the game, well, investors are going to look at the numbers and say, oh no, this is unsustainable. I don't think we will be able to get profits from this. And they'll usually pull out their investments, and the company usually goes under. And that's the reality, right? Even AAA live service games that requires players to pay up to play suffers from the same issue. Like, why can you convince me to actually play Concord just for the fact of, oh, it's a huge budget game that was being supported by Sony, and I don't know, it looks cool, but the problem is if the majority of the players do not care about their designs, well, that's it. The game just shut down literally like 2 weeks after they launched, and yeah, that's pretty bad. And Sony just literally lost a lot of money just because of them believing in just thinking that this game can be a huge game and not understanding their own player base. So the main reason of why that game even failed is because, well, the characters just does not look appealing. Now, sure, you might argue it's related to politics or related to the whole, anti-woke movement or stuff like that. No. The problem is really just rooted in, like, they don't really look good at all. And they look very mediocre in comparison to other games. That is the real reason on why the game failed, okay? And because this is a real reason, this is more of the reason why we need to allow, premium items or skins to be tradable. Okay, let me again give you some great examples that, the games that actually keep their life, keep their games community engaged even like 10 years after their games has been existing for the longest time. Like, let's be real, right? Like the Team Fortress 2 hats and cosmetic items from the loot boxes. The same thing that goes with Counter-Strike skins. Like, do you realize how ridiculously long these games has been on the market for the longest time? Why are they still here? Why are they still running? Why are they still profitable? Well, because every single loot box requires a key to unlock. And, well, that key, the price of the key can be fluctuated all the time. And whenever there's new type of loot boxes, depending on what kind of item is in it, the price of the loot box might be higher or lower. Hence, there's a whole economy existing for just those things. And these systems and the monetization method is really the main sustaining factor of all these free-to-play live service games. And sure, you might argue, hey, that is kinda the same ordeal, aren't it? Like, buying the keys still requires you to pay real money, and even if you sell the keys, or even if you are able to sell those skins, it's just going to be Steam currency, aren't it? You cannot really just outright take the Steam currency out of your game and convert it into real life money. aha, this is where, a lot of like gray area stuff happens. But the fact that the games allow them to actually do that, the fact that Valve actually has been earning so much money from just doing this, it's insane that I haven't seen any other games actually doing something like this. Sure, you might argue, hey, that means gacha games are much more, free-to-play friendly then, because technically you can just earn enough pulls and, pull for the character and the weapon and boom, you got it. You don't really need to like pay a single dime. But there will always be a time when you are unlucky and then you have spent all of your free pool currencies and suddenly, oops, you just realize you did not really get anything out of the pool. Guess what? That is the perfect timing where the game would force you to, hey, why don't you buy our special packs? Why don't you buy our bonus packs so that you can actually, buy this amount of currency and get this amount of currency for free? Those kind of predatory monetization FOMO comes in there. Alright, so then, what happens if that premium item, however, can be tradable not with just the premium currency, which is the same thing like, for example, something like Warframe or something like Path of Exile. Alright, maybe there is a solution that is actually way better than this. This is then where games usually like put in auction houses where they can actually trade in premium items for, in-game currency. However, let me then present you this one certain game that I've been sticking with even with all the negativity surrounding this game. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. Now, this is still so far the only live service games that I think actually allows their players to resell premium items and not using a weird, misconstrued or confusing currency. No, it's just the main in-game currency that you use for everything from grinding, from gearing up, for refilling your healing items or buying stuff from the market. It's literally just completely different from a lot of free-to-play live service games out there. Because when your in-game currency has now pegged a premium item in terms of value, well, it actually makes that in-game currency has tangible value, even if it's not really that much in comparison to like the real cash currency. Like, that means that people or the market can dictate how much an item costs. For example, if you see something like a sphere that looks like a human skin and it looks like it can increase the size in your chest area, that item's pricing might go way up. Or what about other things that are much more basic, for example, like some random accessories that might fit a certain person's fashion game, but not exactly a cup of tea for the majority of the players, the price of that item will go down. So because of this free market situation here, right, it makes it such a way that, you can technically game it. You can benefit from this market. So a lot of players who are, playing this game, it's not really like they are playing the game because of the content, because of the, the gameplay, the story, the other stuff about the game that they should be playing. But instead, most of those people who are playing the game now resorted into becoming an economist instead. And it's probably a good thing, because to be fair, a game like a PSO2NGS, if there is no fashion or there is no AC scratches existing at all, it's probably not going to be able to sustain itself for like 4 years on end like this. Like in this timeline of 4 years, I've seen so many live service games just literally got shut down, and it's not funny at all. Especially even competitors that are trying to, get some marketplace from PSO2 as well, which is pretty funny when it happened. But it's also a sad thing because it just means that there is no other games that's very, very similar to what PSO2 brings for a lot of people. So it's truly a different feeling when you can actually see a new premium banner coming out, or a collaboration banner that is actually going to be very limited, because there might be no more chances for you to obtain those collaboration items after the license expires, etc. But the items that you can actually pull from the game is going to exist in the game, and there's going to be a supply somewhere, and some people might hold on to those supply and sell later because they know the value of those collaboration items is going to skyrocket when the collaboration goes away. So because the special placement of like PSO2NGS being a Japanese game, first and foremost, is that they get to be able to access to a lot of unique IPs from Japan itself. So what happens then? Because they are able to then get a lot of collaborations from popular IPs in the Japanese anime industry, or the Japanese games that people might actually love, or even retro ones that we actually got because of the Western population or the global community. Because they actually know about that. That's the reason why we get Black Lagoon. That's the reason why we actually get a lot of those more classic animes, I guess. Like, it's no joke that we actually got all these, because it's really rare that you can actually see them actually collaborating to just get something like that. And it's because of this unique exclusivity that I think you mostly see only in like Japanese or South Korean or Chinese gacha games has. Well, that means, hey, you can get a lot of those collaborative items from just playing the game. And it's pretty cool because it doesn't really mean like, oh no, you need to pay up money in order to get them anymore, just like a lot of other gacha games usually forces you to do. But now that, because you know that the premium items can be bought with in-game currency, you will now then farm for it. And guess what? This game allows you to farm the in-game currency efficiently. Yes, you might argue, oh no, it will take several hours on end. But compare that hours on end compared to like paying up with your own wallet though, it suddenly makes a lot more sense that spending some time to just earn the currency is actually going to be worth the time, because hey, that means you can actually afford this costume, afford this fashion item without paying a single dime. You're just paying with your own time, and it's amazing. It just feels like a different version of the older games where you can play those games and earn everything by time, as long as you're constantly farming it or constantly trying to get it. It's like that noble gold rush feeling that you get back then on finding a legendary weapon and all those RPGs that you play back then. But of course, the different thing is that you are now farming for the sake of the fashion item, I guess. So this is pretty cool, because a lot of people might argue, okay, then don't you think this would be abused by the RMT bots? I mean, real money trading bots, or abused by players who just buy all the cheap stuff and resell them in like the higher prices? Well, the thing you have to remember is that they are now contesting the pricing of the item with every single player in the entire game now, because every single player wants the lower price. So even if they were to accidentally price the item higher and they just buy out all of the lower price items, well, another person might be able to undercut them and put up all of the cheap items again. And they will be getting all the profits instead of the bot getting all the profits. It is probably the main reason on why the RMT bots just stop appearing nowadays, because it's just pointless. There's not really exactly a good way for them to mitigate the market undercutting their profits. So for the most part, RMT bots just don't really care about the market. And because of that, well, the pricing of items becomes normalized and become dictated by the market again. And all of this is just completely natural. You don't really need to have like a moderation and stuff like that. No, not exactly like that. But the developers can also set price caps for like, okay, this item cannot be sold under this amount of money because it's a premium item, etc, etc. So the fact that the developers actually did that means that they are able to monitor the entire marketplace. So it should be okay, even if like people are trying to abuse the game currency. So I think it's fine and dandy. However, of course, it's not perfect. I feel like there is still a way to probably improve the monetization in terms of the standpoint and stuff, but it stands supreme at the moment because regardless of how many issues that PSO2 New Genesis is currently facing, most people probably could forgive them and stick with the game just because of this reason. Like, tell me, is there any other game where, you can literally just buy a cash shop item for free using in-game currency, by the way? Not any other like secondary currency or currencies that actually has to be exchanged from a premium currency, but they are completely different in names despite being the same thing, etc, etc. No, especially with all the EU laws coming in, I don't really think those currencies are going to be, able to survive in the future anyway. So, but something like PSO2 New Genesis, oh boy, it's very easy for them to just fix and actually follow the laws, to be honest, because PSO2 New Genesis has always been a very free-to-play friendly game since the start. Like, sure, they still have some issues when they started out, like for example, there's a lot of like things like the auto sell being exclusive for premium players, or the storage items are usually very, very hard to obtain, especially if you don't really know how to obtain the star gems, etc, etc. But most of those issues are also being fixed by them actually adding a lot of these QOL items into the free battle pass, which means that if you don't really care about any cosmetic items on the premium battle pass, you can just simply don't care about it. You can just simply unlock the normal free to play battle pass that is easily obtainable by every single player, and you'll be fine, because in the free battle pass they'll give you the mission pass storage, which is literally a free 1 month time period of like a free storage for you, and then you can also obtain the personal market ticket, which means that you can actually place items on the market in 3 days period of time. And I think it's definitely enough if you plan ahead of what things you wanted to place onto the market. Okay, so it's all in all an extremely free-to-play friendly in not just the gameplay section, but also on the cosmetic front, which is something that is rarely seen in a lot of free-to-play live services nowadays. So then we are coming to an end, I guess. Some people might say it's FOMO tactics, or that they have invested way too much into the fashion endgame, or other reasons, but in reality, they just cannot really find a different game that can, do the same thing as PSO2 New Genesis. A chill game despite having precise action combat, a social place where all their friends and families can dress up as any character they like with their own collection of fashion items, all can be afforded by the in-game currency. A place where people could roleplay, albeit according to the terms of services set by SEGA, of course. A place where they can create a fantasy of their character that they have imagined when they were kids finally becoming reality. And also for a game where they can allow their creativity shine when they are able to mess with their home base in a creative space, where they can tell stories, they can make NPCs, where they can tell and they can actually do a lot of crazy things around that is very, very expressive in comparison with a lot of other free-to-play games. All completely free as well. And of course, it's just very hard nowadays to find a free-to-play game that actually allows you to just express like this. For many, Phantasy Star could be a sci-fi, it could have been a grungy, dark atmosphere and high-stakes games like the older games from the past or PSO2. For many, however, their Phantasy Star is probably just another place of expression, fulfillment of their character customization without all the hassle of learning to model or draw their favorite characters. I think if the free-to-play player is investing their time into playing your game much more actively than a person who actually pays money, I would suggest you at least to actually reward them something. And I think the best reward you can ever get is for them to actually able to buy not just, gears and weapons and, cool stuff, but also reward them with fashion accessories. Reward them with achievement fashion stuff, or maybe just something for them to flex their dedication to actually playing the game and enjoying the game. A lot of people keep telling us that they should always cater to like the casual players and stuff, but I'll be real with you, right? Casual players would just play the game for just a short moment and maybe would just come back next time, or they would literally just leave the game as is and never come back anymore once they actually feel like they are bored. But dedicated players, in the other hand, you can actually retain those players and actually make the community alive. So I don't really see any drawbacks of actually allowing fashion pieces to be traded, since they already did it in wealth. So I think everybody should be able to do it. And this is my hope for future games, and I really want them to just allow the player to unlock fashion pieces in game as well, instead of actually locking all of these fashion pieces behind the paywall on the cash shop. Allow them to be tradable, and it will actually create an economy system that will be pretty sustainable, not just on the free-to-play player side, but also for the game to prosper as well, because the veterans or the people who are whaling the people who actually whale the game is able to actually profit from this, and they are then able to think of a different way to actually return back to the free-to-play players by just selling those fashion pieces that they don't really need, because this is just how it's supposed to be, a free market economy, while real-life economies does not really reflect this kind of thinking. I think especially in a virtual world like MMOs or live service free-to-play games, I think this should be the norm, especially for games that has a lot of social elements, or games that actually shows your character in the third person. I think those games especially needs to have a fashion-centric kind of mindset. For games that are much more first person, that is a little bit tricky, because you don't really see your own character except for maybe your equipment that you can see in the game. But yeah, that's another thing still. But other than that, I just wish monetization for fashion items and vanity in general should be loose, and not actually giving any players any advantage other than just looking much more cooler and much more different from each other. every single person I've seen, especially in free-to-play games, they just look the same, unfortunately, because you cannot really customize their characters, you cannot really customize their, their accessories, their clothing colors, and everything like that. The small little parts of the character designs that you cannot really change is really, really bad. And that's the reason why I still love games where you can actually dress up your OC character, or just a character that is completely different from the rest of the NPCs and stuff like that. I know this video, all in all, is not really that grand or serious in many schemes of things, but especially with more important issues at hand, with the game's real issues, However, do keep in mind that base PSO2 was the game that started the whole fashion endgame content stuff. Firstly, the game has started as a sci-fi epic adventure. Unfortunately, they just decided to go all in on the isekai route and the anime route, so, dressing up as your favorite anime characters become a reality now. And it actually brought them to the peak where they can actually stand alongside with the likes of Final Fantasy XIV at one point, which is pretty crazy considering on how niche Phantasy Star Online 2 was at that point. But, unfortunately, however, that is also the main reason why NGS has to keep the original base PSO2 game alive, because they know that they would not be able to get a lot of those collaboration items back again into the future, completely new and separate and different Phantasy Star Online title again, unless they still, make the game alive. Now, I don't really think people can, need to worry about if NGS is going to last longer. I think it's going to do fine, especially with how much AC scratch they are able to still churn out despite all the setbacks, I guess. Otherwise, NGS would have not been called PSO2 at all if the cosmetics were all sunset, just like how, Destiny 2 sunset all of the previous contents. And yeah, for many, Phantasy Star could be anything. But all in all, fantasies can come from you.
Fantasy